Welcome to Competition Law course, and dear learner and viewer, I am going to deliver my second lecture on the competition laws and policy in South Africa. Dear learner and viewer, you can rightly recall my earlier discussion on the competition laws and policy in South Africa. What we have noticed that South African competition laws and policies serves as a guide, as a model that can be replicated across all the countries in the continent of Africa. The primary focus of the South African competition law and policy is to resolve the competition disputes and try to see that how in the atmosphere and the ecosystem of the economic liberalization it happens to accord a very prominent place to the value of competition as well as the economic well-being of the individual. It tries to spawn economic growth. It tries to have spurring innovations and economic liberalization. The broader goal of the South African competition law happens to create a kind of an anti-competitive restraint and lowering of the prices to improve the quality of goods and services. And besides, it should also foster some kind of the innovation. In that respect, we have seen the Regulation of Monopolistic Condition Act of 1955 having a very general kind of understanding of the competition and applying the competition laws and policy and the competition concern in a broader framework of the public interest. We have also seen the Maintenance and Promotion of Competition Act of 1979, wherein we have noticed that there was a creation of the competition board in order to look into all kinds of anti-competitive merger and the monopoly situation in the industrial structure. And we compared and contrasted both the laws, no meaning thereby the regulations of Monopolistic Condition Act 1955 and the Maintenance and Promotion of Competition Act 1979. Along with, we have seen how the 1998 Competition Act of South Africa happens to draw the economic efficiency and the independence of the institution in matters of merger control and heralding a competition policy in South Africa, besides establishing an enforcement structure and practicing some of the very important tools and strategy for adjudicating the competition disputes and redressing the competition compensation of payment of the compensation in matters of the competition dispute or advancement of the competition remedy. With this, what we find, dear learner and viewer, that these three laws happen to set the entire framework of the competition in law and policy. In the present lecture, we are going to have the broad features of the Competition Act 1998. The Competition Law of 1998, which came into force in 1999, happens to set some kind of the important reform which addresses not only the historical economic structure in South Africa, but also it tries to encourage the broad-based economic growth model which is prevalent in the South Africa. The Competition Act 1998 has been fundamentally reformed the entire corpus of the competition law in the South African jurisdiction, and it has actually and substantially strengthened the power of the competition authority as per the best international practices and the norms. And then this Competition Act 1998, besides elevating to the best international practices and the norms, have created a very independent competition tribunal to see that how the competition law goes well in matters of enforcement, execution, and as well as advancement of the competition remedies. Therefore, what we see that the competition law amendment of 2000 has been precisely very clear in giving a kind of a relationship between the general competition and the other regulatory bodies, because the South African law on the subject, be that the Regulation of Monopolistic Conditions Act 1955, be that the Maintenance and the Promotion of Competition Act 1979, have not been very careful in creating a kind of a competition structure which happens to have some kind of an autonomy, some kind of an independent in deciding the competition dispute. In comparison to these two laws, the Competition Law 1998, which still was suffering some kind of the same hangover problem, but the Competition Law Amendment in 2000 have very clearly established the linkages, the interrelationship between the general competition law and the other regulatory bodies. In this respect, we can just refer to the Department of Economic and Development guides, which happens to be a guide and a force to work of the Competition Commission and as well as the Competition Tribunal. Thus, what we see that not only there happens to be a competition tribunal, but there happens to be a competition commission. And the competition tribunal and the competition commission are being managed by the Department of Economic and Development. And thus, we see that the competition law amendment of 2009 is something very significant in that respect. And we find that these new changes in the structural competition regime of the South Africa happens to be very important, very progressive sounding, that what has not been done under the two earlier laws, meaning thereby Regulation of Monopolistic Condition Act of 1955 or the Maintenance and Promotion of Competition Act 1979, that kind of the inherent weaknesses were removed in the Competition Law 1988, and what was still said not to have been removed was removed by the Competition Act Amendment in 2009, and then it has been further enhanced and improved in the context of the Competition Law Amendment of 2009, which have bifurcated the role of the Competition Commission, the Competition Tribunal, to work under the unitary guidance and the control of the Department of Economic Development. With this, we see that the changes which has been brought in the entire competition structure in the South Africa happens to be examined, is a case of examination, and on a deeper examination, what we find that the Competition Law Amendment Act of 2009 happens to provides and offer a concurrent jurisdiction between the competition authority and other sectors, a specific regulator, market inquiries, criminal liability, and and fixity of the responsibility in matters of cartel conduct and the situation of the complex monopolies, and thus the Competition Commission's corporate leniency policy was also one of the basic feature of the Competition Law Amendment Act of 2009. Thus, we see that this kind of the legislative upgrades of the competition law in 1998, in 2000 and 2009 happens to be a kind of a progressive step. Then what features are there under this competition law of 1998? That seems to be examined in a detail. And when we examine the features of the competition law of the South Africa of 1998, we find that the act deals to two main areas. The one happens to that it prohibits practices in merger, and then it tries to distinguish the restrictive trade practices which are horizontal and which are vertical, and it also tries to curb the abuse of dominant position. So in a way we can say that the broad features of the competition law of 1998 in South Africa resembles invariably as to what happens to be the fundamentals of the competition law in any country, and that's why there happens to be no any kind of innovation or innovation on that respect. What needs to be examined here that the Competition Act of 1990 of South Africa tries to define, tries to interpret, tries to apply the purposes of the act in a very holistic manner. The law also tries to prohibit practices which include restrictive, horizontal, and as well as vertical practices. It also tries to strike on the abuse of the dominant position, and it also tries to be very vigilant and comes very heavily against any kind of the excessive pricing and the price control. Then what we see over and above this law, taken as a general perception, covers merger, covers competition assessment, covers public interest grounds, and the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal working under the umbrella of Department of Economic Development happens to fill the gap and tries to see that the competition law are to be enforced in a very effective manner. And then this law also lays down the procedure for investigation, access to the information, and the entire enforcement and the procedural methods and the methodology. It has very nicely pulled out, and the Competition Act, seen from that perspective, dear learner and viewer, what we find that it generally prohibited from engaging in restrictive horizontal and vertical practices, preventing or lessening the competition, or which had an effect of preventing or lessening the competition in the South African market. It also tries to address the firms and that were not allowed to abuse the dominant position in the market by other things, or inter alia we can say that charging of excessive prices and any step which these firms in the market are adopting for the detriment of the consumer. These things have been taken care of under the broad features of the competition law of 1998 by the South Africa. It is under this context, dear learner and viewer, we will try to understand that what has been the broad features of the competition law of 2008, what has been the major objectives of the competition law of 1998. With that, we will try to see that what happens to be the purpose of the Competition Commission in regard to promotion of the competition in South Africa. In that respect, again, we have to look back to the Competition Act of 1998 and to see and to decipher that what are the purposes which has been laid down in the law in respect to the Competition Commission in South Africa. We find that the Competition Commission in South Africa happens to promote and maintain competition in the South African Republic, and not only whatever it seems or deems necessary to promote and maintain the competition in the Republic of South Africa, the law or the Competition Act 1998 try to promote the efficiency, try to promote adaptability, and see that how the promotion of efficiency, promotion of adaptability will go along with the development of the South African economy. So the purpose of the Competition Commission in that respect, we find that it's not only try to see the entire developmental paradigm from the viewpoint of the efficiency and the adaptability, it also tries to provide some kind of a consumer who must have their own right, and the rights of the consumers are not to be compromised. Market should not be detrimental to the consumer, rather the market should be beneficial to the consumer. And how it can be made possible? It can be only made possible through the competitive prices and the product choices. If there happens to be a large basket of the choices, large product basket, and then the propensity of consumer to consume a particular goods and services can only be depend upon the competitive prices. And in that respect, the Competition Commission of the South Africa happens to see that the prices should always be lowered, and it should not be allowed to govern the market in such a way that will be quite detrimental to the consumer interest. Then the purpose of the Competition Commission is also to promote employment and advance social and economic welfare of the South African. That the purpose of the competition is to generate employment and not to cut the employment, and the generation of employment will certainly go a long way in advancing the social and economic welfare of the South African people, and that purpose is well taken care by the Competition Commission of the South Africa. The Competition Commission of the South Africa also happens to see that the market where the consumer have access, and then it has not only have the access, but they have the freedom in matters of quality, freedom in matters of variety of the goods and services. And then the market which goes along with the competitive line should really be competitive in providing a large access to the consumer and create a kind of an environment for South African consumer and the people in general to compete effectively in the international market, and that capacity is to be built upon among the domestic firms, and that is one of the fundamentals purposes, that is one of the fundamental objective of the competition commission, to see that there is a kind of an ecosystem where the domestic markets and the firms in the South Africa can compete with the international market by regulating transfer of the economic ownership and keeping the public interest always on the top. Thus, we see the establishment of an independent institution to monitor economic competition and at the same time giving rise to the international law obligation of the Republic of the South Africa under the purposes and the functions of the Competition Commission of South Africa provided under the Competition Act of 1998 goes very well in overall achieving the objectives of the competition underpinned in the foundational value of the South African competition law. With this, we will try to just reflect upon the structure of the competition authority and the competition commission, and then we will try to see that how these structures happens to be built upon and serves a kind of a promissory augury in furthering the cause of the competition in South African jurisdiction. What we have learned today, dear learner and viewer, we have tried to see that what happens to be the features of the Competition Act of 1998 and whatever promises has been engrafted under the Competition Act of 1998, how it goes well with the purposes of the Competition Commission, and as well as how it tries to administratively manage in the structure of the Competition Commission, meaning thereby that which consists of a commissioner and two deputy commissioner, and how the commissionerate with its security of the tenure for the 5 years and happens to conduct a market inquiry and have been very vociferous to impede, distort, or restrict competition, meaning thereby it keep a constant vigil to the activities which impede, distorts, and restrict the competition and try to achieve the very purpose and the object of the Competition Act of 1998 with consultation and considerations. Thus, the entire commissionerate of the administrative structure of the Competition Commission, be that the commissioner, be that the deputy commissioner, and they enjoy a greater degree of confidence because they are being appointed by the minister under the Competition Act of 1998, and their tenure happens to be for a period of 5 years. Then that kind of a stability which has been accorded to the Competition Commission of the South Africa seems to be very important features of the Competition Act of 1998 in heralding what we can say the competitiveness and the sustenance of the competition in South Africa, and the commission is well empowered to deal all those situations which tries to impede and distort and restrict the competition, and has been equally empowered to have some very punitive actions. And then it is expected that whatever edifice and the structure which has been created within the framework of the Competition Act of 1998 and whatever the objectives and the purposes which has been underlined under the Competition Act of 1998 should go along with the working of the Competition Commission as well as the working of the Commissionerate as a well-served inspectorate and enforcement agencies having all kinds of powers and having an unbridled power to look that the competition in South Africa happens to have the capacity to march with the global market and the international player. With this, dear learner and viewer, I conclude to say that not only the law which has been attained some kind of a sophistication in South Africa, but the very administrative structure of the Competition Commission and the commissionerate consisting of the commissioner and deputy commissioner serves to be a very effective organization in bringing the competition law to the enforcement, and it serves